They mocked her, dared her to play, thinking it would be a joke. But when Naomi lifted her worn violin, the room fell silent, hearts pounding. Was she about to crumble under pressure, or unleash a sound that would change everything? What happened next left the entire school frozen in awe, and none of them saw it coming. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. It was always fifth period, always the back row, always the same worn violin case resting quietly between Naomi Foster's knees like it was too fragile for the world to notice. In that cramped, fluorescent-lit classroom of Toledo Central Middle School, Naomi was a shadow. The kind of student who teachers forgot was there unless they needed to take attendance. Head down, shoulders tucked, words carefully rationed. Naomi had perfected the art of blending into the wallpaper. The violin, scuffed and scratched, was the only thing about her that stood out, and even that most kids thought was just part of her oddness. But on that particular Tuesday, everything shifted. Coach Benson, the school's well-meaning but clueless gym teacher, was making his usual chaotic announcement about the annual talent showcase. His voice bounced off the walls, more bored than enthusiastic. "All right, folks, sign-ups are open. Singers, dancers, jugglers, whatever you got, bring it to the stage." Most kids barely listened. Some scrolled on their phones. Others passed notes. Naomi, as always, kept her eyes down, fidgeting with the latch on her violin case. That's when Ms. Darcy, perched in the corner like she owned the room, pointed straight at Naomi. "What about our little violinist?" she said with a syrupy sweet smile that masked something sharper. "Surely you'll show us what that thing can really do." Her voice carried through the classroom like nails on a chalkboard. Coach Benson, oblivious to the tension, chuckled. "Yeah, come on, Foster. Been carrying that thing all year. Time to make it earn its keep." Laughter spread like a slow-moving fog, soft at first, but building until the whole class was leaning into it. Kids nudged each other. Someone imitated screechy violin sounds. Another kid whispered, "She'll probably break a string." The words stung, not like a slap, but like a cold wind slipping under your clothes. Naomi kept her eyes down, willing herself to stay invisible. Then slowly she looked up. Not at Ms. Darcy, not at Coach Benson, not even at the kids snickering around her. She looked through them, eyes steady but unreadable. "I'll do it," she said softly but clearly. The room froze, caught between disbelief and awkward silence. Coach Benson blinked. You serious?" Naomi didn't answer. She didn't need to. She just reached for the clipboard being passed around, signed her name, Naomi Foster, performer, 16, and slid it back across the desk without a hint of drama. No tears, no anger, just certainty. Ms. Darcy's smirk faltered, her confidence cracking ever so slightly. The laughter died down, leaving behind a charged silence. No one had expected Naomi to say yes. They expected her to crumble, to shy away like she always did. But Naomi had said yes, and now the room didn't know what to do with itself. What they didn't know, what no one but Naomi's mother and little brother knew, was that Naomi didn't carry that violin like a prop. It wasn't for show. It wasn't just a hobby. That violin was Naomi's voice. And now, for the first time, she had decided to let it speak. After school, while others scattered to fast food joints or hunched over cell phones in their bedrooms, Naomi traced the familiar 4-block route home, violin case in hand. The cracked sidewalks and faded murals of Toledo's west side were more welcoming than the school halls. When she stepped through the peeling door of apartment 2B, the weight on her shoulders eased, just slightly. The apartment was small and worn, but to Naomi it was the only place where she didn't have to shrink herself. "Is that you, baby?" Monica Foster's voice called from the kitchen, where she was bent over a chipped sink, scrubbing dishes after a double shift at the hospital. Naomi's little brother Micah, 6 years old and full of questions, peeked from behind a doorway, eyes wide. "Did they make fun of you again?" he whispered. Naomi offered a small shrug as she dropped her backpack. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. In their shared bedroom, Naomi laid the violin case on the bed like a delicate secret. Every night, after Monica left for her night shift, Naomi practiced until her fingers tingled. The cracked walls knew every note. The neighbors, who sometimes banged on the walls when she missed a pitch, knew it too. But none of them knew how much that violin meant. It was more than just an instrument. It was her grandfather's legacy. He taught Naomi her first scale, sitting in this very apartment years ago, long before cancer took him away. His words echoed even now. If your mouth can't say it, let the strings tell them. So, Naomi played. No sheet music, no grand piano accompaniment, just calloused fingers on worn strings, bending and shaping every note into something raw. The piece she practiced wasn't from any textbook. It was hers. A blend of the blues her grandfather loved and the classical pieces she'd taught herself. It didn't have a title. It didn't need one. Every note carried a weight of scraped knees, late rent notices, and the quiet ache of a girl who always felt 2 steps behind the world. Micah often sat in the doorway, swinging his legs. "Why don't you play something happy?" he'd ask. Naomi would pause, bow hovering. "Sometimes, Micah." Happy and sad sound the same. And with that, she'd return to the strings, pouring herself into every vibration. Naomi's mom knew the rule: never interrupt Naomi's playing unless it mattered. And yet sometimes Monica stood outside the bedroom door, exhausted but listening. No tapping, no corrections, just silent, reverent listening. What Naomi didn't realize was that, through those cracked walls, her music wasn't just echoing, it was reaching. By the next morning, Naomi's name was already scrawled on the talent show sign-up sheet, tucked between doodles and careless scribbles. Kids crowded around the list by the cafeteria window, laughing, pointing. "Naomi Foster, who even is that?" one of them snickered. "Probably gonna squeak out 'Twinkle, Twinkle' and cry." The words weren't whispered. They were served loud enough for Naomi to hear as she walked past, clutching her violin like a lifeline. She didn't flinch. Not on the outside, at least. She was used to these kids, used to the way they side-eyed her in the hallways or mimicked the sound of screeching strings behind her back. It had been like this all year, a quiet storm of ridicule she endured in silence. Even now, they didn't see her as someone worth noticing, just a background character marked by poverty, quietness, and worn clothes. Yet, as the snickers echoed down the hall, Naomi only walked taller. Every comment folded neatly into the growing pile of reasons she'd step onto that stage. She wasn't blind to the fact that many were hoping for a disaster. She heard them whisper, "She won't even show up," and probably too scared. They wanted her to back down, to disappear like they always expected her to. Mr. Bradley, standing by the gym doors during lunch, glanced at Naomi and raised an eyebrow. "You sure about Friday, Foster?" His tone wasn't exactly encouraging. It was more like someone offering her an out. Naomi simply stared back. Not angry, not smiling, just steady. "I'm sure," she said quietly. Later that day, Ms. Dawson, watching from the teacher's lounge, muttered to no one in particular, "She's setting herself up for humiliation." But not everyone thought so. Malik, the soft-spoken boy from music club, caught up to Naomi after school. "You doing an original?" he asked, voice low. Naomi nodded. Malik grinned. "Good. Play them something they don't expect." Naomi gave the faintest nod, her lips barely curling. For the first time all day, it felt like someone actually saw her. Because Naomi wasn't afraid of failing. She wasn't playing to prove them wrong. She was playing to finally be heard. Naomi's apartment always smelled faintly of old wood, laundry detergent, and whatever cheap candles her mother could find on sale. After school, she slipped inside, letting the door click softly behind her, and for a brief moment the noise of the world outside, the laughter, the taunts, the expectations, disappeared. In its place was quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty but sacred. Naomi immediately unlatched the worn violin case, careful with the frayed hinges, and lifted out the instrument as if she were holding a fragile secret. The living room doubled as her practice space. A faded, second-hand couch and chipped coffee table barely filled it, but it was enough. Sitting cross-legged on the carpet, Naomi took a deep breath and let the bow fall gently across the strings. The first note barely whispered out, but she stayed with it, steadying her shaking hands. She didn't practice scales, not tonight. Tonight she played the piece, the one she had been shaping quietly for months. It had no official title, but Naomi knew what it was about. Every pull of the bow, every slide of her fingers, was a piece of her story. In the kitchen, her mother, Monique Foster, listened through the thin wall as she prepared dinner. Tired from double shifts, she leaned against the counter, eyes closing for just a second, letting the music wrap around her like a quiet blessing. She never interrupted when Naomi played. She knew her daughter needed the music like she needed air. After a while, Monique poked her head in. "Baby, you sure about this?" she asked softly. Naomi kept playing but gave a small nod. "I already said yes." Her mother stepped fully into the room, wiping her hands on her apron, and sat beside Naomi. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You know that, right?" "I'm not doing it for them," Naomi replied without hesitation. Monique gently touched her daughter's calloused fingertips. "Then who, baby?" Naomi's eyes stayed on the violin as she whispered, "For me?" And in that small, cramped apartment under the hum of an old ceiling fan, Naomi made a decision. No matter how many eyes stared on Friday, no matter how many waited for her to fail, she would not be playing for them. She would be playing for herself, for every late-night practice, every ignored moment, and every quiet truth she carried. As Friday crept closer, Naomi could feel the weight of eyes that never really saw her before. In the hallways, at lunch, even by the lockers, kids whispered behind cupped hands. Some swore she'd back out. Others bet she'd squeak out a clumsy nursery rhyme and melt into tears. Even teachers joined the undercurrent of doubt. Ms. Douglas, scribbling the final performance lineup on the whiteboard, paused when she reached Naomi's name, letting out a small, skeptical chuckle before moving on. It wasn't just a joke anymore, it was an expectation. And yet, Naomi didn't flinch. She sat at the edge of the lunch courtyard, violin resting across her lap like it was part of her, quietly tuning each string. She wasn't immune to the whispers. She heard every cruel word, felt every side glance. But she'd been carrying doubt longer than these kids had been alive. This wasn't new. What was new was the fire building beneath the surface. Amongst the noise, only one person stepped out of the crowd. Malik, a quiet seventh grader known for his late afternoon piano practices in the music room, approached Naomi as she packed up her violin one afternoon. "You doing something famous?" he asked softly, careful not to meet her eyes. Naomi shook her head. "Original." Malik's lips twitched into a rare smile. "Good. Give them something they can't compare to." And just like that, a small crack formed in the wall Naomi had built. Not an invitation to be saved, just recognition, something no one else offered. That night, Naomi returned home and played until her fingertips throbbed. Miles peeked from their shared bedroom, eyes wide. "Are you gonna win?" he asked. Naomi didn't even pause. "I'm not trying to win." She pulled the bow across the strings, letting the melody drift into the room. "I'm trying to make them listen." Little did they know, by the time the sun set on Friday, listening wouldn't be a choice. It would be unavoidable. The day of the showcase arrived like a storm Naomi had seen coming all week. The gym buzzed with the restless energy of students eager for spectacle or failure. Rows of folding chairs creaked beneath students and teachers alike. Phones were charged, fingers ready to capture every awkward stumble. Naomi stood backstage, her palms clammy against the worn wood of her violin. She could hear Mr. Benson's voice echo off the high walls, introducing acts with forced enthusiasm, and the audience's reactions bouncing between polite claps and muffled laughter. When her name was called, hesitantly, as if even Mr. Benson wasn't sure she'd show, a hush settled over the room. Naomi stepped forward. Not a stumble, not a single glance back. Just her, the creaking stage, and a silent audience. From the front row, Ms. Paulson crossed her arms, smirking, expecting a train wreck. Malik, tucked in the middle rows, sat forward, hope flickering behind his quiet demeanor. Naomi stood center stage, violin resting gently on her shoulder. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the first note. It wavered, delicate, trembling in the cold gym air, but Naomi held it, let it grow, let it breathe. Then suddenly the song shifted. The bow sliced across the strings, sharp and confident. The gym wasn't a gym anymore, it was a storm. The melody pulled everyone under. She wasn't playing for them. She was speaking to them. Every insult, every quiet meal at home, every late night under a flickering ceiling light, it all bled into the music. Students who had leaned back, ready to mock, now leaned forward, eyes wide, phones lowered. Even Ms. Paulson blinked, sitting straighter. The music swelled, crashing like waves, then softened, like a whispered secret you never wanted to forget. And when Naomi finished, the silence was deafening. Not a sound, not a breath. Just awe. Then, softly, Malik stood and clapped. Alone. Then another. Then another. Until the whole gym erupted in applause. Not the hollow, half-hearted kind, but thunderous, honest clapping that shook the air. Naomi didn't bow, didn't cry. She just nodded, eyes steady, as if to say, "I told you." And without a word, she stepped off the stage, leaving the storm behind her. By Monday morning, the halls of Easton Middle were different. Naomi noticed it the second she stepped through the front doors. The whispers hadn't vanished, but they'd shifted. No longer sharp-edged with mockery, but filled with hushed amazement and awkward admiration. Heads turned, not with ridicule, but with curiosity. Some kids stared at her like she'd grown a second head, others like they were seeing her for the first time. One kid even mumbled, "That's her," as she passed, like she was some kind of urban legend now. Naomi didn't strut, didn't puff up her chest. She walked the same way she always did, violin case snug under her arm, eyes steady, shoulders relaxed. Except this time, there was a quiet confidence in every step. Mr. Benson stood by the teacher's lounge door, fiddling nervously with his lanyard. When Naomi passed, he cleared his throat. "Good job, Friday," he offered, eyes not quite meeting hers. Naomi nodded without slowing down. It was Ms. Paulson who surprised her most. Leaning against her classroom door, arms crossed, she watched Naomi approach. "Naomi," she called softly. Naomi stopped, but didn't move closer. "I owe you an apology." Her voice wavered slightly. "I misjudged you. I let the room decide for me." There was no smugness, no dismissiveness this time, just an uncomfortable teacher realizing she'd failed a student in the worst way. Naomi could have said a dozen things, the sharp comebacks, the anger, the bitterness she had carried for months, but instead she simply replied, "You should have listened sooner." It wasn't cruel, it was just the truth. Ms. Paulson blinked, caught off guard by the quiet strength behind Naomi's words. In the cafeteria, Malik slid her a chocolate milk without a word. Naomi arched an eyebrow. "You just gonna assume I like chocolate milk now?" Malik grinned. "You crushed it. Chocolate milk feels earned." For the first time in a long while, Naomi let out a small, genuine laugh, one that made even nearby tables glance up. Not out of ridicule, but with quiet wonder. And just like that, the girl who once took up as little space as possible was suddenly the one everyone noticed. Not because she demanded it, but because she made them feel it. That night, back in their small apartment, Naomi didn't go straight for the violin like she usually did. Instead, she sat on the worn couch beside Miles, who was watching cartoons with the volume too low and the brightness too high. Miles looked up, wide-eyed. "Did they clap?" he asked softly, as if the answer might change everything. Naomi leaned back, resting her head against the fraying cushion. "Yeah," she said simply. "They listened." Monica peeked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a faded dish towel. "They listened because you made them," she added with a small, knowing smile. Naomi nodded but didn't say anything. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to. Later, while Monica tidied up, Naomi found herself standing in front of the apartment window, watching the soft glow of streetlights and the occasional passing car. The city felt quieter somehow, not outside, but inside her. For years, Naomi had been shrinking, curling in on herself like it was safer to be small. But now, after everything, she realized it had never been about proving anything to the teachers or the kids, or even the whispers behind her back. It was about proving it to herself. On the kitchen table lay the folded note from Ms. Tran. "When they don't expect you to shine, shine anyway." Naomi read it again, then tucked it carefully into the front pocket of her violin case. Not to remind her of what had happened, but to remind her of what came next. The applause from Friday might fade, the teachers might still stumble through awkward apologies, and the kids might move on to the next rumor or joke. But Naomi knew something they didn't. Something she could feel deep in the bones of her fingers. The pull of every bow stroke, the quiet after the final note. She had already won. Monday arrived, draped in a gray, drizzling sky, but Naomi's steps were lighter than usual. As she walked through the doors of Edison Middle School, something subtle but undeniable had changed. Eyes followed her, not with the usual dismissive glances or whispered mockery, but with curiosity, and for some, even admiration. Students who had never spoken to her before nodded respectfully. Others stepped aside, clearing the path like they suddenly realized she had always deserved the space. At her locker, Mr. Brooks, the once indifferent PE teacher, approached, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, Naomi," he said awkwardly. "That was, pretty amazing on Friday." Naomi gave a small, polite nod and kept sorting her books. She didn't need validation, not anymore. It was Ms. Dorsey who surprised her most. Standing stiffly at her classroom door, she caught Naomi's attention. "Ms. Forrester," she called. Naomi hesitated. Dorsey's voice was softer than usual, lacking its usual sharpness. "I owe you an apology," she said plainly. "What I said, how I acted, it wasn't right. I underestimated you, and that's on me." Naomi stared at her, not bitter, not triumphant, just still. "I'm still learning," Ms. Dorsey added quietly. Naomi could have lashed out, could have thrown back every slight, but instead she met Ms. Dorsey's eyes and said, "You should have seen me before Friday." Then, without waiting for a reply, Naomi turned and walked away, her head held higher than ever. Later that day, as Naomi sat in the cafeteria with her usual plain sandwich, Malik slid into the seat across from her, grinning as he placed a small carton of chocolate milk on her tray without a word. Naomi arched an eyebrow. "What's this?" she asked, amused. Malik shrugged. "A reward," he said. "Next time, we're doing a duet." Naomi smirked, shaking her head. "You're not ready." For the first time, a genuine laugh escaped her. Not forced, not hidden, and it caught the attention of several students nearby. Whispers rippled through the room, but they weren't mocking this time. They were curious, maybe even a little impressed. For Naomi, it wasn't about being famous or winning anyone's approval. It was about finally being heard. At home that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Naomi sat beside her little brother Miles, watching cartoons in silence. When Monica peeked from the kitchen and asked if she wasn't practicing tonight, Naomi simply answered, "Not tonight, Mama. I'm good." And for the first time in a long time, she truly meant it. The quiet was no longer something she feared. It was hers. This story is a powerful reminder that some of the strongest voices are the ones we overlook. Naomi's journey isn't just about talent. It's about courage, dignity, and the quiet defiance to be seen on her own terms. In today's world where people are often dismissed because of how they look, where they come from, or how quietly they move through life, Naomi teaches us that true strength lies not in proving people wrong, but in staying true to yourself. We all have a violin, a gift, a truth, a passion that deserves to be heard, even when others don't expect it. So if Naomi's story touched you, if you've ever felt overlooked or doubted, remember, your moment will come too. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of their own voice.